The first 4th of July I well remember was in 1971. We were living with my maternal grandparents in Hobart, Indiana, while my father was serving in Vietnam. At the time, I didn't think much about any of that. Dad had already been over there once and came back fine. Plus, I was a little boy. Young boys don't spend much time worrying about the world. They worry about firecrackers, ice cream, and catching lightning bugs. The backyard seemed enormous back then. Later on, it felt like it was no bigger than a postage stamp. But when you're 5 years old, everything feels larger than life. I remember Grandpa and my eldest uncle standing on the back porch lighting firecrackers and throwing them out into the yard. To me, that was better than television. When evening came, we'd move out in front of our South Virginia Street home. That's where the lightning bugs were. My brothers, neighborhood kids, and I would run through the yard chasing them with a mayonnaise jar that Grandpa had punched holes into with an ice pick. When you caught enough of them, the jar would glow, not brightly. Just enough to make a little boy believe he'd captured a handful of stars. I remember the 4th of July parade, too. The route came by and turned onto 3rd Avenue, headed the mile toward downtown. The whole city seemed to show up. Families lined the streets. Bands played. Fire trucks rolled by. People on the floats threw candy into the crowd. And every kid along the route suddenly became an Olympic sprinter. On the corner of Washington and 3rd sat a drugstore. Grandpa would sometimes walk us there afterward. My favorite was an orange push-up ice cream pop. I can still remember the sherbet taste. Other times we'd walk across the railroad tracks toward Lake George. My brothers and I would stand on the bridge, throwing rocks into the water, trying to see who could make the biggest splash. At the time, life was simple. Maybe that's because childhood is supposed to feel simple. Children are given the gift of not knowing everything. Sometimes that's a blessing. A few years later, on another 4th of July, we watched fireworks near Hobart High School from the railroad tracks. The fireworks were beautiful, the railroad track grease not so much. By the end of the evening, the seats of our pants were covered in black grease. Grandma thought it was hilarious. My parents were not as amused. Military families didn't have money to spend on replacement clothes. Looking back now, it is funny to think about. At the time, not so much. Years later, my grandmother mentioned something in passing. Almost casually, she said it happened around the time my dad got shot down in Vietnam. I remember looking up from the back seat of their car at her. Her visor was down, and the mirror showed her reflection as she freshened her makeup. Nobody had ever told me that. December 4th, 1971. While I was catching lightning bugs, eating orange push-ups, watching parades, and scrambling for candy, my father was flying combat missions halfway around the world. One of the men on his helicopter didn't make it home. My father did. But like many veterans, he rarely talked about those days. Even now, more than 50 years later, there are things he carried that his children never saw. And maybe that's what I think about most when Independence Day comes around. Not politics, not speeches, not even fireworks. I think about how many burdens were carried by people around me that I never knew existed. My father carried them. My mother carried them. My grandparents carried them. And because they did, I was free to spend my summer chasing lightning bugs in a front yard in Indiana. Back then, freedom wasn't a word to me. It wasn't an idea. It wasn't something I debated. It was a parade, an orange push-up, a mayonnaise jar full of lightning bugs, a grandfather who walked us to the drugstore, a family that protected childhood while carrying worries we couldn't yet understand. And I didn't know any of that in 1971. I was just a little boy enjoying the 4th of July. These days I realize that's what all those adults were working so hard to preserve. We do this because freedom still rings.